What's going on, y'all? This is your girl, Brie Undeniably, checking in for another episode of my speaker series, Deep Conversations with Dope Individuals, where we're discussing development, decision making, and dedicating yourself to purpose. I am here, as always, with another dope individual. Before I jump into who she is exactly, I got to give a couple of shout outs, as I like to do in the beginning of the podcast. So, first and foremost, if you are watching this episode on YouTube, or listening to it in any of your podcast streaming sources. That is all thanks to Gotham Podcast Studio. You will see the studio space that I'm in. You'll hear the crystal clear sound quality, all thanks to Gotham. They support me. I love to show them support. So shout out to Gotham Podcast Studio. Also, shout out to MC Kicks. I shout them out all the time. They have sponsored me with so much awesome free stuff, as well as just their endless support. Right now, I am wearing the MC Kicks Soulmate sweatshirt. So if you can see that, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the Soulmate sweatshirt. Valentine's Day or not, you can go to MC Kicks. I know they do holiday drops all the time, but they are there for all your customizable merch, sneakers and denims. You can find them at EMCEEKICKS. And finally, when you're doing your own thing, you got to pump your own thing up. So if you have not checked out my website, which is brieundeniably.com, you can go there. You can get all of the dope individual merch there. You can see what else I am doing other than podcasting. So check out my workshops and speaking engagements. And you can get some merch yourself. So the I Am Possible gear and the dope individual gear, all at brieundeniably.com. Okay, those are all my shout outs for today. And now I am super excited to introduce Ann Hince. Ann, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. So I want to give you the introduction that you deserve, and then we'll get into the episode. So, everybody, this is Ann Hince. Ann has developed the ability to sense inside her body and release physical tension stored in her connective tissue using solely the focus of her mind. She has x rays to show the physical changes resulting from the inner work, including changing the alignment in her eye sockets, the straightening of her neck, the centering of her lower jaw, and the growth of tooth roots. She has also grown a half an inch at the age of 55. Anne has a YouTube channel where she shares her journey, explains the connection between the physical and the spiritual, and will be posting videos of how to change the presenting issues of our time. Her book, A Pathway to Insight, details her journey and breaks down the steps she took to attain what she calls insight, or the ability to see within the body. And welcome again to the show. I'm really happy to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Really happy to be there, be here.
Wonderful. As all of my listeners know, in the counseling community, we like to meet our clients where they're at, and it's a really important practice that I like to bring to everywhere in my life when I'm speaking with a new individual. So I'm hoping that you can help us meet you where you're at and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you. Well, I am sharing my story. I've
Hmm.
realized over the years, over the last few years, that I really, really love deep conversation and
You're in the right
sharing my
place.
story. Yes, yes, sharing my story is a way that fulfills me. It's really
Hmm.
satisfying. So that's where I am right now. I'm doing a lot of this inner work. That's again, we'll talk about it, but how good it feels to release inner tension, which I'm just doing at a deeper and deeper level now.
Wonderful.
So that's where I am right now. Yeah.
Yes. So you've been sharing your story. I know we're going to get into your story. That's the best part of the podcast, is really diving in. But for you, this is you've been sharing it for how long now?
About 7 months. I published my book on 11/11/2020.
Very cool. Okay.
But I've been doing podcast interviews now for about 7 or 8 months, and
Great.
it was actually realizing that I love these deep conversations and where can I get them. So this is a great way of of having that satisfaction.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you for being here, getting ready to tell your story. I'm ready to jump into it. I know that we have spoke briefly. I actually do, just before we jump right into your story, I think I want to give a small disclaimer that Ann's story does deal with past trauma and bereavement. So if this is something that feels sensitive to you right now, and please feel free if I'm missing a trauma that needs to be mentioned before we kind of hop into it. But if these are sensitive topics to you right now, I just want to make sure that we give that disclaimer. We will be talking about some heavy things, but that have led to some pretty incredible things in your life. So just putting that out there. If you are listening, I would recommend listening in a comfortable, safe space if this is a trauma that is particularly triggering for you. And I will let you kind of go ahead and take the floor now, please.
Thank you. Well, one of the things, just from what you said, one of the things I've realized over the years is that the more trauma we have in childhood, the greater our capacity for spiritual growth. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Of course not.
Although in the time, it seems it in the time, obviously.
Right. That's a great way to put that, though. The more trauma experience, the more capacity for that growth. You said for spiritual growth as well. Very well put.
Yeah. So as I'm talking through my story more and more, I'm realizing, how much trauma I did have in childhood. It started out with being adopted. And even before I was adopted, I was actually born with my right foot up against my right shin. So my first 6 weeks, I had physical therapy. And then I was adopted into a family that had just had their baby that they had adopted previously was taken away. The birth mother changed their mind and took the baby away. So I was brought into that situation. So that in itself, I think, was a huge trauma, but most of that was subconscious. So I think I'm probably working through that right now because I've got so deep. But to begin with, I wasn't, aware of those traumas. It was more later on. And it was, a lot of it was, my parents became alcoholic. Both of them were alcoholics. So, days felt like they were hell because I couldn't trust what was happening and everything I said was wrong. So I actually stopped talking at some point. I stopped saying my opinion on anything because it wasn't worth saying. So that kind of built up. It was walking on eggshells every day. And then when I was 19, I woke up one morning and I found my mother dead in the bathroom. I was the only one in the house at the time. My dad was working in a different country and my brother was at his girlfriend's house and I didn't even know who she was. So that was a huge trauma, obviously, at the time. And I didn't know what to do with it. We never talked about emotions. My mother actually died of cancer, but it was a sudden death, traumatic death for her. And we'd only talked about her cancer one day, the day we'd been told she had cancer and there was nothing we could do about it. We never talked about it again, ever. So it was just the water that I swam in childhood. I just didn't know what to do with emotions. So I just kept on going with life, didn't know what else to do. And so I suppressed it all. And I didn't realize how much it was affecting me until about 20 years later when I was a stay-at-home mother and I had 2 young boys. And I had kind of a business altercation with a couple of other mothers at school. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't feel I'd done anything wrong, but they did. And my mind just started spinning out of control. Like I just go through it over and over and over in my mind, and I couldn't sleep for days. And it was then that I realized that there's something going on with me. It's like, I'm sure this isn't normal. And it was at that point that I started to think, well, maybe there's something from my childhood that I haven't dealt with that is affecting me.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So it was actually based, that sort of turnkey moment that you had to realize that you should go back and sort of look into your past was actually based on it. Was it an interaction with these other mothers or just your relationship with them, or?
It was an interaction. It was something I'd done that they were not happy with. They were both very strong-willed women. And all my insecurities came up. If someone who was an authority figure was saying anything to me, I would just shrink. You know, it was obviously I had done something wrong because that's what I grew up with. That's how my dad
Mhm.
treated me.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
you kind of, it's almost like you realize when you said when you would shrink, that was almost like a conditioned behavior of yours that you had no idea was even a behavior of yours, maybe.
absolutely,
That,
yes, yeah. It was all subconscious,
yes.
all of it up to that point.
Yes. And that really is, for anyone listening and they're like, what is a conditioned behavior? A conditioned behavior really is something that we are conditioned to do, typically subconsciously. And it also typically happens when we're younger based on the adults in our life and what they do and how they tell us to respond or how we respond that is, expected in their eyes. You get conditioned to continue to repeat that behavior because it serves you in some way again when you're younger. So that is really, I guess, the short version of what a conditioned behavior is.
Yeah, and these days I think sometimes, you know, like in the movie The Matrix, we kind of think of it, I think of it as programming. We were
Exactly.
programmed, yeah, programmed in childhood, and we just repeat it
Yes.
without knowing we're doing it.
That's an
Yeah,
even shorter answer. Program. It's human programming. It's a great way to put it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay, so this interaction happened and you said, "Whoa, let's now I've got to look back. There might be 20 years of buried stuff inside of me."
Well, I didn't even know what to
Yeah.
do with it at that point. I didn't know how to think about it, but it was soon after that, and I don't remember how long, but I actually went to a doctor's appointment, and I don't remember why I was going there, but it was around this time frame, and he recognized that I was more stressed than I should be given
Mhm.
my situation, which was a stay-at-home mother with two young boys. And he asked me what my stress level was on a 0 through 10, and it was an 8. And then he asked me why. And that's when I knew it's like the tears from my mother's death 20 years earlier was still just under the surface. You know, they would just come as soon as I thought about it. So at that point, he used this technique with me, and it's a little weird. It's called EFT, which is short for emotional freedom technique, and it's also called tapping. He used it with me for about 15 minutes, and I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death in my mind without the tears there, without the emotions. And that was the first time I realized that those emotional memories are stored physically in our bodies.
Wow. First and foremost, thank you for sharing, you know, up until now, this piece of your story, because, you're sharing these breakthroughs, which are, I just want to take a pause for a second because it seems like this was another major moment for you.
It was. I didn't know they were stored physically in my body.
Right, right. And that's that takeaway, at least for you. And I want my listeners to hear, like, you realize that emotions were actually physically stored. And that is a huge realization to come to, especially when it is, when you knew exactly what those tears were falling from. You knew exactly where they came from.
I did, yeah. And you know, that was the start of it because I actually went home. I have an engineering background. I was a software engineer,
Okay.
so I like to know things work. So I checked out this technique EFT,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to know it worked. So I had a 17-year-old cat at home. So he was towards the end of his life, and we were told he needed a daily saline shot. So I have always had a fear of injections because I've had so many in my life. And the first time I gave him a shot, my hand was just shaking uncontrollably. I wasn't going to be able to do it every day, which had to be done every day. So I thought, well, this is a great test case. Let me see if this technique works on more than just that one experience I had. So I did. I tapped about my fears of giving my cat this shot, about my fears of a shot itself, my history around shots, and the next day, the needle just slid right in, and my hand didn't shake at all. Not one little bit. It was totally peaceful and calm. So that was the point where I realized that this technique is really kind of deceptively powerful. It doesn't really seem like it's doing a lot, but I knew then that yeah, that really is very powerful. And that's when I started using it on a daily basis.
So I really want to talk a little bit more about EFT and tapping. And for those listening, I have many of my listeners will know that I've had a EFT trained professional on the show before who has really, gone through with us to talk about what tapping is and how that could help. But I think this is such a great perspective shift because this is coming from someone who really benefited from the power. She benefited as well, but she kind of took it to make it her practice. So we've kind of had the technical side of EFT. I want to talk definitely about your personal experience with it. But first, please feel free to let everyone know what it is again and exactly how it works for anyone who might have missed that episode.
Okay, yeah, feel free to go back and look at the episode.
Yeah.
It's very much like acupressure in that we're tapping on certain points in the body as we're talking through an experience. So, what we're really doing, we're using words to bring the experience, the emotions, the feelings back into the body. And the tapping on the points releases that stuck energy from the body as we're talking through it. So, the goal is to keep going, keep talking through it, keep tapping until the intensity and the emotions have subsided. And one of the great things about it, again, from my engineering background, is knowing that it works. So it actually provides feedback. So your voice will change, right? As if you start out really angry
Mhm.
and then you're letting go of that anger, it will end up becoming just a story to you, and your voice will just sound calm. But also it will, a lot of people yawn. That's almost the most common thing I would say. Yawning is a sign of release of emotion, of tension, and tears, obviously. Some
Mhm.
people will burp, and some people will get really tired. And that's, I think that's pretty much it. But that's how you know that you are releasing energy from the body. So that's really nice to get that feedback.
Yes, and it's so unique because you think that, we know we can go to a mental health specialist if we want to just talk about our emotions, and we know we can go to a doctor if we want to fix something with us physically. But I think what's so unique about tapping and EFT is it's the connection between the two. It's the connection between the emotional therapy and the physical therapy. It is really sort of fusing those two things together, talking through whatever it might be that you are going through or that you're trying to work through, while actually connecting your words to a physical sort of pressure point, so to speak, in your body. So really, really interesting just how, tapping sort of combines the emotional and the physical, which is just very interesting.
It does, yeah, and that's what I found out over the years. It's really that physical, it's that tapping that actually makes it so powerful in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, at least. And one of the things that I've realized it's doing, it's kind of opening up the subconscious mind.
Yes.
And as it does, right, more and more memories and a depth will come that you weren't aware of to begin with. So even when you're tapping through a story, so I would tap through the story of finding my mother. As I did it over and over again, more detail would arise, right? Because as you let go of those outer emotions, the
Mm-hmm.
ones from underneath will bubble up to the surface. And what it's doing is it's opening that subconscious mind. It's actually expanding the awareness, which makes sense, right, of what we're aware of. And what I recognized inside of me is that I was becoming aware of the emotions that I had because I wasn't used to those, right? I'd suppressed them. So I wasn't even aware of how I felt in any moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I was becoming aware of those emotions. But then after I'd done enough tapping, I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions, right? Because every emotion, we use the words, right? We use the word fear or anger or sadness or frustration, but actually we're using that word to describe a set of physical sensations. We have tensions inside of ourselves, right? We're frustrated. We might feel it in our solar plexus. And so I became aware at that deeper level. Now, it took a lot of time to do this. I started using EFT daily to work on my emotions. Like if I felt I was becoming emotional during the day, then I would tap about it. And as I did, I found my mind becoming quiet and I wanted more because I knew it was changing things. So I wrote down every emotional memory that I could remember on a sheet of paper, a couple of sheets actually maybe 3 or 4 sheets. It was quite a lot. And I went
Got it.
through them one each night for about an hour to an hour and a half every night. And I found my mind becoming peaceful. And that was my goal, to have a peaceful mind. But it was really happening. It was really changing. And I remember opening my kitchen door one day and just thinking, it feels like I'm living in a different reality because my mind was so quiet. And that was when I recognized that the words that I had been using in my mind, the ones I criticized myself with and judged other people, those had been my dad's words that I had been programmed with in childhood. And I just used them as my words. And I just played them over and over again. And I couldn't see that until they were gone, until my mind became quiet. And then it was different.
Oh, so many things I want to push into right here, but let me just recap a couple. So, first, I think that everyone should take the time to write down all of their feelings and emotional experiences or emotional, you know, that emotional baggage, because it just seems like even the starting point of that writing exercise could have been beneficial to sort of get them out on paper and realize, like, wow, I have 4 pages of all of this emotional stuff that's been sitting inside of me. The fact that you took that and then went a step further and took one each night and tapped on it, or used EFT using it, um, I can only imagine sort of the power you felt after each session, kind of like with a weight. It's like checking one more box, having that weight lifted a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter. So, I'm so fascinated by that specific exercise that you did. How long did that take? And you said you would do about an hour and a half to a night. Was this for weeks, months, longer?
It was probably 2 or 3 months as I was going through those. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But I saw the difference.
Right.
It was worth it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially when you really are at the place, some of us might not be at the place where anyone is even ready to recognize that there's trauma or emotional trauma or anything. So to be at the place to know that, there is emotional trauma here and I'm going to do whatever I can to rid myself of it. I mean, that I can imagine that once, you knew it was there and you knew what was working, doing that every night could have been the best part of your day. To know how powerful and impactful it was going to be for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I came to the recognition or the realization that it's just stored inside of us, right? That those
Mm-hmm.
memories, they only exist inside of me. They don't exist anywhere else.
Yes.
So once I knew there was freedom on the other side, right? And that experience with the cat, giving the cat injection, that made
Mm-hmm.
me realize that it's freedom on the other side. I know it's sometimes scary to look at those traumatic moments, but it's really just energy that's stuck inside of us. And if you can have an experience where you can get to the other side and realize that that's all it is, it's just energy that's stuck inside of us, it becomes easier to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think, the power of that is reflected in what you said about your father, how those were your father's words. And once you were able to actually, like, it was as if you physically saw them and looked at them and realized this actually didn't come from me. You tapped it out and you realized that it was coming straight from him and you were just programmed. That energy was programmed inside of you.
Yeah. So I tapped on, all the memories I had around him. But as I did that, so my awareness expanded. So I started to
Mm-hmm.
become aware of more things. And as I did that, I became more aware of that voice inside of me, those words I was using. And then I would tap on those.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can use tapping pretty much on anything, right? We can use it on anything we're afraid of. And there's a lot of fear around these days. So whenever we're feeling emotions of any kind, right, even a business experience, right, if something you're afraid of doing to expand, we can tap on it and let it out because it's just energy that's stuck inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as I became aware of these physical sensations, I actually realized I didn't need to use EFT as much because it felt like I was kind of taking my awareness from the physical sensations when I was tapping on myself. And it was easier just to focus on those physical sensations. So at this point, I kind of moved what I call beyond EFT. And
That's
I
so,
just became aware of the sensations. And I would hold my focused awareness on those sensations. And the same thing happens, right? With EFT, we're actually focusing on the words and tapping on the body. And that's that focused attention that actually lets it shift. So I was kind of doing the same thing with the physical sensations. I was holding my focused awareness on the sensations. And as I did, they would shift. So kind of this felt like a next step along the journey.
I like that you said beyond EFT because it really, you're no longer tapping, you're just focusing. And what I think is so unique is that this is, this is not something that we only experience in adulthood. I actually have, everyone knows that I am a counselor as well. And a couple, I would say about a year and a half ago, I was working in a program with elementary schoolers, and I'm usually work with middle schoolers and high schoolers, but this program I was working with specifically was elementary schoolers. And we did a few lessons on emotions and really trying to put it into like bite-sized understanding for 5-year-olds. But we did a lot of work with recognizing where we felt a feeling. So when you get nervous or excited, where do you feel that? And for my little ones, a lot of them would point to their stomach. Like they would get butterflies in their stomach. When you get scared, where do you feel that? A lot of them would point to their face because they know that their face would make it change. But then some of them who have experienced the goosebumps, or, I know we call them different things around the world, but that raised skin that when your hair raises on the back of your neck or on the sides of your arms, they would point to that because they realized when they were scared, they would feel that physical sensation. So I just think that it's so interesting that, we have the ability to tune in to what our body is doing physically, but it feels like somewhere along the way, maybe there's just not enough counselors in this world teaching it. but
Yeah.
maybe I feel like it needs to be taught because it's not something that human beings are leaning into. We're not leaning into those physical sensations in our body to understand what's happening. That's why this
Yeah.
conversation is so unique.
I think it's in childhood we dissociate because we start using the words, right? Our
Mm-hmm.
parents start saying, "Oh, you're angry," or "You're frustrated," and we stop feeling those sensations and we start using the word. I'm
Mm-hmm.
frustrated, and we don't feel the sensations anymore. So this process is reversing that, right?
Yes.
We're no longer the tapping worked with the words, but now we're at a deeper level and feeling the physical sensations aware again because we become aware of them. So again, it's a deeper level of awareness. So instead of tapping each night at this point, I would lay on the sofa and I would bring a collective trauma to mind because I had worked through a lot of my childhood things,
Mm-hmm.
and we all have our own experience of collective traumas, right? So I had 9/11, right? I
Mm-hmm.
would bring that memory to mind and feel all those physical sensations from all those emotions inside of me and just hold my awareness on them. And they would dissipate. And then I do it again, dissipate again. And I just do it over and over again with the same memory until there was no longer any physical sensation underneath it. And I would do that each night with the different collective traumas. And I just felt, it's as I said, it feels really good to let go of old tension that has been inside of you for like 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So there was nothing I would rather do.
It must be like the most deep tissue massage feeling to really release that. And I think that it is unbelievable that you have turned this practice, um, sort of a reactive practice into a proactive practice. You have turned what, what you were doing to sort of relieve yourself of an experience. Now you're training yourself with collective trauma to really deeply feel the experience and understand it at a level that you don't necessarily have to understand it at, but you've made it proactive rather than reactive, which is truly incredible.
Yeah, I started to come to the understanding of how the law of attraction works,
Mm-hmm.
really works, like that we are emitting a signal every second of every day, and that the whole of us is that signal, and
Mm-hmm.
we're attracting it back into our future. So, I started asking myself, well, how do I feel right now? And normally the answer was not good. So, do I want to feel this way again in the future? And if I didn't, then I need to do something about it now, because I knew that I was going to get this feeling back again in the future. And I didn't want that. I wanted to feel good in my future.
Yes.
So that really helped me, help push me and keep going along the way. And because I saw things on my outside changing as my inside changed. So I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely know that that saying, as within, so without, is true, no doubt.
Well, I definitely think that it is time for us to really understand the things on the outside that we're changing. You saw, as I mentioned, sort of in your brief bio in the beginning here, you saw some pretty incredible biological changes in your body from doing this, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. So let me just quickly finish my story then, because I was able to, after
Please.
doing this, I was able to put my awareness inside and keep it inside after that. After those
Mm-hmm.
physical sensations had released, I could keep my awareness inside my body. And then I just started doing the same thing, holding my awareness on the tension I could feel in there. And it would dissipate. I'd do it again and again and again. And at some point, I could put my awareness in my head, kept doing the same thing. And at one point, I actually heard and felt something release. And it felt like old fabric ripping. And I realized, I did some research. I realized it's the connective tissue that had been held tight and it started to release. And then I would just do the same thing. I'd do more and more every day. And eventually I actually felt, I could feel my skull bones relaxing, because there'd been the forces inside my head were unbelievable when I put my awareness in there the first time. So I worked with it little by little, and my head has started relaxing. So it was really nice to get those x-rays last year to actually see the physical changes, that this deep relaxation, this deep release of dis-ease inside of me has actually relaxed my body more into physical alignment. I know we've heard that word alignment a lot. We use it in terms of, manifestation and emotional alignment, but to actually have my body move more into a physical alignment has been really nice.
I can only imagine. I mean, at the time when you started, or even when you were progressing through your tapping, and then post tapping or post EFT, I don't. Did you realize that you could actually have such powerful physical transformations as well?
I didn't know this was possible. That's part of the reason I'm sharing my story, because I've not heard anyone else talk about this. If I had known this 10, 20 years ago, it would have pushed me along. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, please continue. We have to hear more. I think that I know that everyone's waiting to hear about all these physical things. You really felt the connective tissue start to break apart, essentially.
Yes, releasing the bonds that have held it tight. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel it more and more everywhere. Every time I release somewhere in my body, it also always releases in my neck or my
Mm-hmm.
face at the same time. So I have my own built-in chiropractor these days. If I release enough tension somewhere, my neck will crack again because it needs to readjust. So I think that's why I've grown half an inch. I actually want to be measured again. I think it's probably more now, because I just feel my neck becoming straighter every day as it's releasing more and more tension. So yeah, I know that that is releasing disease in the body. So it's kind of fun.
I mean, it's really incredible. And I want to kind of say how I am understanding and interpreting, and then you can feel free to correct me or tell me that that is correct. We'll find out. But so essentially what I'm thinking is from you like relieving stress. When we think about stress, and I know when I teach about stress, we talk about how stress will tighten us up. We don't think of stress as, comfortable, free flowing, fluid in our body. When we think about stress, we think about tense shoulders or squinting eyes or tenseness in our mouths or even tightness in our chest, an upset stomach. So we kind of think about this contraction somewhere in the body. And, that's only the ones we can feel. But if we know that we can feel it contracting, it might be contracting in other places in our body that we can't necessarily feel. So if there was held stress for 10, 20, 30, however many years, that is you just think of your whole body sort of as like this really tightly wound being. And then, and then you kind
of
of
use that in our words, right? We say people are highly strung, and I would say I was highly strung.
Yeah, and that so I can't speak to the science of it necessarily, but I can speak to those, those pieces that stress can actually physically be connected to. Stress can be felt physically and emotions can be felt physically. So though I wouldn't be able to speak to, the exactly what's happening with our, neural pathways as this is happening, it definitely makes sense to me that sort of doing some type of intra-awareness relieving practices would also not only find their way through your emotional self, but certainly open up your physical self as well. So, for you have seen that in the doctor's charts, physically growing and expanding. And I know that there was even something with dental, that there was
my jaw was totally off to the side, and it's much more centered now. So yeah, what it's shown me is that the physical, the emotional, the mental, they're all totally connected. And I think each step along the way, EFT is working on the physical, even though we don't recognize that as we start doing it. But even when we're releasing the emotions, we are changing the physical body.
Wow. Okay, so Anne, I want to know, you are out here telling your story now because clearly it has so much power. It has not only emotional and physical power for you, but it has power to impact others, because we know that there are many people experiencing a whole list of different social, emotional pieces as well as traumas in their life. So for you, you are out here, you're kind of on a podcast tour telling your story. What else are you doing to sort of get this word out there and get your story told?
Well, my book shares the story in detail.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be talking around the world. Is what I'd like to do, is go and share this story, this power that we have inside of us, with as many people as I can. What you just mentioned about, yes, we all have so many emotions these days. A lot of the times we think it's someone else. We kind of blame it on politics or, someone outside of us. But our part of anything that's happening these days is how we feel about it. That's where our control is. And we can work on those feelings, right? Even if we think it's politics, we can still tap about it and let go of how we're feeling. Because if we're in peace, then we're attracting peace to us. So we can't blame other people. We can always work on ourselves.
That's very well put. I really like that piece on peace. If we, yes, very well put, and very, very true. Okay, so can you tell us the name of the book one more time as well, just so everyone can? We'll go over that at the end, and everyone knows. I will put that in the show notes and everywhere so they can find it. But let's just talk a little bit more about the book. So that is that chronicles your story.
It's called A Pathway to Insight.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk in detail at the beginning about my theory on the law of attraction and how we store all our history, how we get programmed,
Mm-hmm.
how that works. And it's the connective tissue that I believe it's where we're storing all this tension, because that's what I sense when I'm sensing in my body, sensing through the connective tissue. And that I do believe, as we're feeling those things over and over again, as we're reacting over and over again, we are tightening that connective tissue. And I think that's why we shrink and we get tight as we get old. And I think this is reversing that process. So then I talk about all the different steps I went through with EFT in detail, and then feeling what I call feeling your feelings,
Mm-hmm.
how to do that. It sounds so simple.
Sure
Took me a
does.
little while to work out exactly how to do it. And so I talk about that. And then what it's like to sense inside, which I believe is actually using the inner, what they call the third eye, and what that's like. So, yeah.
I like how you, I think it goes with that, the third eye, or the inner, what's inside. You said that is insight, right? Am I
Yeah,
correct? That's
inward sight,
yeah,
inward sight, inside sight. Yes,
yeah.
and I believe that's the original meaning of the word insight. It's just I don't know anyone else who talks of it that way, because I don't know anyone else who's doing it. So I think that maybe has been lost over time, that meaning of the word insight, because
Mm-hmm.
when we tend to hear it these days, I think people are thinking in the mind, right? They use insight in the mind or
Right.
even out of the mind, but not inside the body, which
Yes.
is what I am doing.
It's very interesting. I think that, that makes a lot of sense to me. Insight, when something is insightful, it's kind of a deeper look into something. Insight could really mean looking into ourselves, looking that deep within ourselves. So,
Yeah. Well, what I found over time is that the more you know yourselves on the inside, the more you see on the outside, right? So I can recognize, if I can recognize tension inside of myself, on the inside, I can see it in other people too. I can see how how the energy of what's happening in the world, I can see it from a different level than I ever could before.
mm-hmm.
So it's fun. It's interesting. It's fun.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that sounds beautiful too. To be able to see something from a totally new perspective, essentially.
It is, coming back to the physical, my neck has moved, right? My neck has released so much. I can physically see things from different perspectives than I ever could before. And because I can do that physically, I can also do that mentally.
Mm-hmm. There is so much connection there. It makes so much sense. I'm so excited to have you here sharing your story. We have about 10 minutes left, so there's a couple of things I like to do in the last few minutes of the podcast. First, as this podcast is central to purpose, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on purpose. And I know that, some people are totally, all in a business plan or fulfilling a lifelong dream or something like that. But I think that purpose is so unique with you and, coming out and telling your story. So I just want to hear, do you feel like you're doing, what is purpose for you right now? That's the way I'll frame that.
Purpose is doing this inner work
Mm-hmm.
because it feels so good to let go of more tension. And as I
Mm-hmm.
do that, I feel like I'm more in tune with spirit, which I would like to be a clear vessel for spirit to come through, whatever that means. Um, but part of it is also feeling good, right? Satisfaction. I'm doing things that I find satisfying,
Mm-hmm.
like this, and I'm kind of using that as my journey, because I did hear a voice just a few years ago. I wish I'd written it down at the time, but I heard a voice that said, I am going to be speaking about this. So, if I find myself veering off, then I remember that and I come back. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And hey, even if you didn't write it down at the time, you still know the message was there. The message was clearly there for you. So you're following in that path, I would say, as closely as you can be
Yeah.
to share your story. Okay, so in these last couple minutes, we're going to do a fun rapid fire question round. Super simple. Don't be worried in any way. And then I'm going to just give you the floor to leave any final thoughts for listeners, and then you can let everyone know where to find you and your book and all of that information. So we are going to do rapid fire. In the beginning, I spoke about the three pillars: development, decision making, and dedicating yourself to purpose. That's what these three questions will be on. And here we go. So the first one is on development. Currently, in this very moment, do you find yourself working more on personal development or professional development?
I would say mostly personal development. There is a little professional in there, but yeah, mostly personal.
Personal. Okay, decision making. I'm going to give you the question and then a little bit of follow up. So, when it comes to making decisions, do you make most of your decisions based on choice, meaning you follow the numbers in the analytics, or guiding voice, meaning you follow gut feeling, spirituality, intuition, or something else of the sort? Choice or guiding voice?
Okay, what I've found over the years is that choice is often based on ego or our past. So I will look to see where the emotions are and do tapping or whatever to come to peace, and then the decision is really through spirit or intuition at that point.
So really that guiding voice piece. Sometimes I just like to guess for myself, and I would have guessed that. That makes a lot of sense based on what we have spoke about today. Okay, the last one is a dedication to purpose. Um, is this a singular moment in time, sort of one of those turnkey moments, or is this a daily practice?
Oh, daily practice. Yeah,
Daily
no doubt.
practice. Got it. All right. That's the end of the rapid fire round. You did wonderful. Thank you for playing along.
Thank you.
So we just have a couple minutes left. I'm going to leave the floor to you to say, leave listeners with whatever you'd like to leave them with, and then let everyone know where they can find you.
Okay. I would encourage everyone just to notice during the day when you are becoming emotional and see if you can catch that. That is the first step, and it's not always easy to do. But it gets easier as you do it. And even then, at that point, taking a deep breath, even that will change the signal that you're emitting. So it will change your future. So that was the first step I recommend. If you want to find me, I have my website, annhince.com. I have my book, A Pathway to Insight. I have a YouTube channel that has some videos of the steps in more detail. And I have a public Facebook page that I love to interact on, and I've been writing things on there. So hopefully I'll see you there.
Wonderful. Ann Hince, everyone. And thank you again so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, everyone, as I end all of my podcasts, until next time, let this be the moment.